The effort to establish a new NHL team identity in Utah is now underway. It will be an intense process for everyone involved, and not without fan feedback. A survey featuring 20 possible names has been put up to a public vote. In this video, we'll take a look at where things stand with the NHL in Utah, and specifically, we'll explore all the perks and pitfalls of those potential brand names as Aesthetics presents Utah in Progress. First of all, I hope you enjoyed my retrospective on the brand history of the Arizona Coyotes franchise. And by the way, if you'd like to see more videos like that for other teams, let me know. That could be a fun series. But with that team now fully covered, I felt like we should delve a bit deeper into the new team coming to Utah. It's been quite the whirlwind over the past few weeks alone, but let's start with a recap of how it all came together. January 24th, just 4 months ago, Smith Entertainment Group publicly requested that the NHL begin a formal expansion process to explore acquiring a team for Utah. I'm sure they expected that process would take at least a year or two. And then, things started to fall apart down in Arizona, and the NHL needed a plan B. Ryan Smith and SEG were more than happy to accommodate. Before anything became official though, Smith started planting some seeds, posting a link to a survey on April 8th asking, if an NHL team were to come to Utah one day, what should we name it? Clearly, the idea was not as hypothetical as it initially seemed, because only 10 days later, Thursday, April 18th, came the official announcement that the NHL was establishing a new franchise for Utah. But it would not be the typical expansion or relocation process. It was something entirely new for the league. They declared the Coyotes franchise inactive and transferred all player contracts to the new Utah club. And just 6 days after that, those players landed in Salt Lake City, arriving for a huge fan event at the Delta Center, the team's new home and home of the NBA's Utah Jazz, also owned by SEG. It was the first opportunity for the locals to meet their new NHL club.
My name's Liam O'Brien. You guys can call me Spicy Tuna. And I cannot wait to get this place buzzing! Let's go!
It looks like everyone there had a blast, and that the NHL in Utah will be well supported. But the question remains, what will those fans call their team? Will there even be a proper name when they take the ice next fall? For starters, Utah Coyotes is immediately off the table. The NHL's deal with Alex Morello means the Arizona Coyotes owner still owns the Arizona Coyotes. For now, at least. He has a 5-year window to start building a new arena, which would allow him to reactivate the franchise. In other words, there is a possible future in which Utah and Arizona exist in the NHL together, and they can't both be called the Coyotes. So, could the team start their season without a name? Is that even possible? Well, Ryan Smith and the NHL seem to be planning for just that. Time is tight, and their first game is only 5 months away. Can a good brand be built on such a short schedule? To be fair, the Vegas Golden Knights did it. The franchise was awarded on June 22, 2016, with a name and logo reveal in November, only 5 months later. Of course, they still had almost a year to develop jerseys and other merchandise before players ever hit the ice. Plus, owner Bill Foley already knew he wanted his team to be called the Knights very early on. As a West Point graduate, he actually wanted them to be named the Black Knights, but of course that would have clashed with his alma mater's trademark. I used the Winnipeg Jets as an example in my last Flash video, but the tighter timeline was easier to accommodate there since they had a pre-existing name that they knew fans wanted. There's no blatantly obvious option in Utah, and there is a lot to figure out in a very short span of time. To that end, Ryan Smith, ever the populist, also happens to be the founder and chairman of Qualtrics, a billion-dollar survey software company. It only makes sense that he would turn to that very software to help determine the name of his new team. So what do the people want? On Wednesday, May 8th, SEG launched the first round of a multi-phase branding process led by community input, specifically an online survey with 20 possible name options open for 2 weeks. Fans were permitted to vote for up to 4 names and vote only once. Now, if you're suddenly wondering about the legitimacy of such a vote, for example, how would they prevent bots from stuffing the ballot box, that's kind of the genius of this. It's like Smith was made for this moment, creator of Qualtrics, now owner of a new unnamed NHL team. His company specializes in what they call best practice survey research methodology, which they say ensures fairness, accuracy, and data integrity. Among those best practices are geolocation identification, progressive discrete choice analysis, and encrypted data collection and storage. Basically, it's a lot of big words to say, if you're trying to cheat the system, they have proprietary ways of recognizing that, and it will not affect the final survey results. So, let's take a look at those 20 names already. It's a lot when you see them all together like this, but we'll go through the whole list carefully. What you'll notice first off is that every name starts with Utah. The one thing SEG knows for sure about the brand is it will represent the entire state, not just Salt Lake City. Beyond that, the survey tells us that whatever name is chosen will debut for the 25-26 NHL season, so not this fall, but the next one. In the meantime, SEG says the club will don jerseys that display Utah during their inaugural season in 24-25. Personally, I'm still struggling a bit with that idea, but it may be necessary given this multi-phase fan input process. We'll get more into that later. For now, back to the survey list, which is randomized for every respondent, so there's no inherent bias in the list itself. Mine will look completely different from yours. I even loaded the survey on another computer just to show that. Now, before we start reviewing these names, where did they come from? SEG says these options were compiled from the initial survey that Smith posted back on April 8th. For this analysis, I'll group the names into certain themes and then offer my thoughts on how well they'd work as we go along. The first one to write off immediately, Utah HC, or Utah Hockey Club. We've already heard this one said aloud in an official NHL setting, and it wasn't great.
The 6th overall selection in the 2024 NHL Draft will be the property of the Utah Hockey Club.
That was NHL Deputy Commissioner Bill Daley during the 2024 draft lottery. The card he held up included this word mark, which seems to be the official placeholder logo for the team, a couple of generic fonts with the powder blue accent color. Based on what was written in the survey intro, it's very possible that this is what we'll see on the front of Utah's jerseys next season while they play the name game. But I really hope they at least get with a proper typographer to design their font before then. The next batch of names contains some low-hanging fruit, focused on a theme of coldness, I guess. The Utah Ice, Utah Frost, and Utah Freeze. They don't say anything about your brand, and they're just trite. Yeah, we get it. Hockey is played on ice, which is cold, but this is the National Hockey League, so let's move beyond that kind of small market minor league thinking. Now, the cold theme does get a little more interesting when tied to one of Utah's biggest tourism draws. Avid skiers might enjoy the Utah Black Diamonds, a term that refers to the most challenging ski runs. But do we need another team with a color modifier in their name? We already have the Red Wings, the Blue Jackets, and Golden Knights. And how does a tricky ski course relate to a hockey team? I think we can do better. Utah Powder might also appeal to skiers, but let me put it to you this way. NHL tough guy and former Coyote Liam O'Brien is a powder. Yeah, how did this one even make the list? I know, there's powder blue in the placeholder logo, but don't read too much into that. When NHL Seattle launched in 2018, years before they had a name or logo, the marketing team's color palette was built around black and salmon red, neither of which ended up in Kraken branding. But back to Utah. Let's look at the names inspired by the kinds of weather events you might find on the slopes. The Utah Blizzard would share a double Z with the Jazz. That's fun, but I'm not sure there needs to be any real brand continuity between the NHL and NBA teams here. And really, it kind of fits with Ice, Frost, and Freeze. A bit too generic. The Utah Squall is slightly more compelling. Similar to a blizzard, a snow squall is an intense burst of snowfall, making this the first name I've heard that could actually describe a hockey team. But squall is just kind of a weird word. How do you make a good cheer out of squall? So I'm not sure about that one. Alright, staying with natural phenomena though, let's consider the Utah Glaciers. Beautiful sight? Yes. Slowest moving thing on Earth? Also yes. Imagine commentators calling Clayton Keller a glacier. NHL All-Star and fastest skater contestant Clayton Keller. Okay, I know he finished last in that competition, but still, he's faster than you or me. He's no glacier. And while we're talking slow, is Utah Canyons really any better? Listen, I've been to all of the Utah National Parks and the North Rim of the Grand Canyon. Absolutely mesmerizing in every way. They're magnificent, but they're passive. A canyon doesn't do anything. It's cut by cold water over millions of years. So again, not really feeling the hockey connections here. For something more active, we could look at the animal names. Utah Mammoth is certainly evocative. You can imagine the logo, with big tusks, maybe even made out of hockey sticks. Oh, like this branding created for Aesthetics' old fantasy hockey league, the IceHL. The Minnesota Mammoths had a great logo designed back in 2008 by Chris Smith. Not me, there's another Chris Smith with a lot more talent, as you can see. But there is a slight problem. In the next state over, Colorado, there's a professional lacrosse team called the Mammoth, and they share ownership with the Avalanche. Given the geographic proximity, a regional rivalry is not out of the realm of possibility between Utah and the Avs, so maybe Utah should have a more distinctive name. Utah Caribou is distinctive and fast, unlike glaciers. Caribou are apparently known to run at speeds up to 50 miles an hour, and speed is a good hockey quality. Problem is, when you think caribou, you don't really think Utah. They're mostly at home in Alaska and northern parts of Canada. So how about the names tied to exciting human lifestyles? The Utah Mountaineers. I can see a brand story developing here. There's no doubt this team has a lot of mountains to climb. Deciding on a name is just the first of many. The players are climbing their own mountains, trying to find stability after being ripped from their homes in Arizona and dropped into a whole new city. Mountaineers might be a little tough to work into a pithy chant at the Delta Center, but there is something there. I'd put the Utah Mountaineers in the maybe category. Could the same go for the Utah Outlaws? I don't love the weird rhyme that's happening there, Utah Outlaws. But again, there's a brand story that tracks with this team. They are a bit lawless, breaking all the hockey traditions. An expansion team that's not an expansion team, a relocated team that's not a relocated team. They're living by their own rules and they don't care. The Utah Outlaws. But I don't know, it just doesn't sound quite right to me. And maybe some of those names are just too specific. What about a brand that's a bit more nebulous, a little tougher to define? For example, the Utah Fury. Violent anger sure does describe hockey at times, especially right now during these Stanley Cup playoffs. Bring that rage onto the ice. Fans can't get enough, and I do love that super short name, standing opposed to names like Vegas Golden Knights or Columbus Blue Jackets. 8 letters is all you need here. Utah Fury is a fun one. And then there's the Utah Venom. This is another one that can mean anger or hatred, classic traits of playoff hockey, but it could also refer to the poisonous output of the types of spiders and snakes and scorpions that call Utah home. There's a pretty good intimidation factor here. And even though I've said Fury and Venom were a little too 90s in a past video, I'm not sure that's entirely a bad thing. Maybe we need a good 90s name in the mix. I might also put Utah Blast in this category. An explosion or forceful attack would be a great parallel to a quick strike hockey team, and with the youth and talent on this roster, all the ingredients are there. That said, Blast feels a bit too broad and bland. Doesn't quite hit the right balance for me. So now let's get into some of the really good ones. The Utah Yeti has developed a kind of cult following over the past few weeks, building a sort of grassroots groundswell, not unlike how Kraken did in Seattle a few years ago, and that's worked out rather well for them. Utah Yeti has a great built-in alliteration. It's easy to chant and cheer. There's even a sense of mystery and terror that comes with mythical creatures like this. But to that point, do we really need another NHL cryptid so soon after releasing the Kraken? And what connection does the Yeti actually have to Utah? It mostly comes from Asian and Russian folklore, right? But they do have snowy mountains, and I love the sound of the name, Utah Yeti. But is that enough to build a unique and memorable brand? But if you want to know my vote, I think it comes down to these final 2 potential names, the Utah Hive and the Utah Swarm, so chosen for Utah's nickname as the Beehive State. The beehive is a common symbol of Utah, but it doesn't refer to literal bees or beehives. It's more of an analogy. Bees are hard workers, tirelessly looking out for each other. It's not about the individual, it's about working together for the good of everyone. Did these words not describe a hockey team to a T? What name could be more fitting? So between the two, how would you choose? Well, for me, Hive suggests a home base, something to protect. Maybe that's how they can refer to the Delta Center. Game night at the Hive. But Swarm is different. Swarm conveys action, an army of soldiers defending the Hive, ready to sting, working together toward a common goal, out to fight the good fight. You can't tell me the Utah Swarm doesn't sound like a pretty awesome hockey team. And it's not just the players either. There's an intrinsic invitation to fans to join the Swarm, and the rink will be buzzing all night. To me, this one's kind of a slam dunk among the options available. It's a good name on its own and full of deeper meaning with great brand storytelling. I think I would put my vote here for the Utah Swarm. So, with the first round of voting now officially closed, what comes next? SCG says more details on the next phase of the branding process will be announced later this summer. But I sure hope they can speed up the process, because after that comes the logo. And to be honest, I can't picture the Swarm as clearly as the Yeti, but that's why the team has enlisted a top-tier marketing agency. Doubleday and Cartwright, based in New York, have been hired to handle the development of the logo and brand identity for Utah once a name has been selected. From there, we'll get jerseys and more. Until then, however, we seem to be stuck with generic Utah jerseys to start the new season, envisioned in rather drab fashion here by Justin Wiltron. That's not a dig on Justin, of course, but the idea of an NHL team playing without a real identity. But perhaps I could leave you with this thought. Imagine a mid-season launch. It's happened once before. The Pittsburgh Penguins started the 1979 season wearing blue, as they had always done. Then one night in January of 1980, they simply skated out wearing black and gold, and never looked back. It was the only time an NHL team has rebranded mid-season, but it doesn't have to be the last. Of course, there's some built-in brand alignment too when it comes to the Swarm. SCG also owns a AAA baseball team called the Salt Lake Bees, with exactly the kind of logo you'd expect. But it does bring up an important point. A team called the Swarm would really have to be black and yellow, right? And honestly, the Utah Jazz are already black and yellow, so there's more internal brand alignment for SCG. But does the NHL need another black and yellow team, even if it is a more fluorescent yellow? When the Penguins made their color change in 1980, it led to a legal fight with the Boston Bruins, who claimed the Pittsburgh club was encroaching on their trademark by using the same colors. Obviously, it all worked out in the end, but it is a question worth raising. And a question seems like a good place to wrap up this video. So here it is. How would you brand Utah's NHL team? I'm looking forward to reading your thoughtful opinions in the comments. Thanks as always for watching. Coming soon to the channel, I'll have more on the future of Fanatics NHL jerseys, which means a lot of good reasons to subscribe if you haven't already. That's all for now. See you next time.